The air in the cathedral ruins was thick with dust and regret. It smelled of cold stone and the faint, metallic scent of ancient death. Kalen Thorne stood amidst the broken stained glass and shattered confessionals, his silhouette a dark, unyielding shape against the single blinding ray of moonlight that sliced through the ceiling. He was the sword of the hunter's creed, and tonight, his mission was the culmination of his entire blood-soaked life. He checked his gear, the razor-sharp vein-killer blade strapped to his back, and the silver-tipped quarrels loaded into his heavy crossbow. The crossbow was an extension of his will, precise, deadly, and without emotion. That's what they taught him. Emotion is a weakness that vampires exploit. She is the vain matriarch, Kalen, the queen of all scourge. Destroy her, and the shadow she casts will finally lift. Elder Lysander's cold, clear voice echoed in his memory. Seraphina Vane. The name tasted like ash. For centuries she had been a whisper, a legend, a myth whispered by the fearful. But now, Kalen had found her sanctuary, a crumbling fortress hidden deep beneath the forgotten city of Viridia. Kalen ran a gloved hand over the small worn silver locket hidden beneath his tunic. Inside lay the faded image of his parents, murdered when he was just a child. A massacre that had stained his soul and fueled his unwavering hate for the creatures of the night. His hate was his armor. He moved silently, a ghost in the shadows, navigating the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the old cathedral. The tunnels were lined with skeletal remains and eerie, intricate carvings, a testament to Seraphina's ancient power. He reached a massive iron-bound door. He didn't bother with the latch. With a silent, powerful thrust, Kalen kicked the door off its hinges. The sound was deafening in the silence. The hunt was on. Kalen stepped into a massive chamber, the one depicted in the thumbnail. It was not a lair of crude horror, but a hall of fallen grandeur. High, Gothic windows framed the space, casting long, dramatic beams of light, as seen in the image. The air here was strangely warm, charged with an intoxicating, heavy power. And then he saw her. Seraphina Vane was not what the legends described. She wasn't a gaunt beast or a screaming terror. She was breathtaking. She sat upon a simple, stone dais, not a throne. Her long, black hair cascaded over a dress of deep violet and rich scarlet, the colors of royalty and spilled blood. Her posture was regal, unnervingly calm. Her eyes, the color of liquid rubies that glowed faintly in the dim light, fixed instantly on Kalen. There was no fear in them, only an ancient, deep-seated weariness. Around the room, several other swords and weapons were strewn on the floor, their owners nowhere to be seen, a silent testimony to her devastating power. Kalen raised his crossbow, the silver bolt gleaming, aimed squarely at her heart. Seraphina Vane, Kalen's voice was a low growl, rough from years of unsaid anguish. Your reign ends tonight. Seraphina slowly rose, her movement graceful, almost sorrowful. She took a step forward, and Kalen felt a pull, not of magic but of a magnetic, dangerous presence. Kalen Thorne, she replied, her voice smooth and melodic like dark velvet. You finally arrived. I was expecting you, though I had hoped your esteemed elder would have had the courtesy to send someone less haunted. Kalen flinched at the word. How did she know? Do not play your mind games with me, fiend, he spat, his finger tightening on the trigger. You will pay for every life you have extinguished. Seraphina sighed, a gesture that seemed too human, too burdened for a creature of the night. I have paid for my existence for centuries, Hunter. But I did not steal your little trinket, and I did not spill the blood of your precious council members. She paused, her red eyes boring into his. I know who did. And they are coming for us both. Kalen's breath hitched. A doubt, small and sharp as a needle, pierced the iron of his resolve. Everything he had been taught was simple. Vampires lie. Vampires kill. But the sincerity in her eyes, the sheer, open risk of her declaration, momentarily shattered his focus. The moment of hesitation was all it took. From a broken archway to Kalen's left, 3 figures, clad in black, tattered cloaks and bearing crude, unholy symbols, rushed into the hall. They were not common vampires. They were faster, crueler, and they weren't after Kalen. They were after Seraphina. The shadow cult. Seraphina hissed, the weariness gone, replaced by a fierce, sudden terror. Kalen's training took over. He wasn't programmed to watch. He was programmed to fight. But the hunter in him was about to make a choice that would betray his entire life. He had aimed his crossbow at the queen of vampires. Now his mind screamed, protect the prey. The 3 figures from the shadow cult moved with a frantic, unholy energy. They were focused entirely on Seraphina Vane, their eyes gleaming with fanatic zeal. They carried no elegant blades or silver stakes, but jagged, rust-colored hooks and crude, cursed daggers. Kalen's hunter instinct screamed kill the vampire queen. But his eyes registered the raw, predatory malice of the cultists. They were not seeking justice, They were seeking to desecrate. And Seraphina's initial terror was not a facade, it was genuine. She was the lesser evil in this moment. In the fraction of a second that defined his future, Kalen shifted his aim. The bolt that was meant for Seraphina's heart instead slammed into the chest of the nearest cultist with a sickening thud. The man crumpled, a choked cry escaping his lips as the silver-tipped quarrel pierced his dark armor. The sudden intervention shocked both Seraphina and the remaining two cultists. "What are you doing, Hunter?" Seraphina demanded, though her voice was laced with an unnerving disbelief. "Saving my prize from being stolen," Kalen lied, pulling a pair of his sharp blades from their sheath. He didn't wait for her reply. He lunged at the second cultist. The fight was brutal, a chaotic ballet of hate. Kalen fought with the disciplined fury of a lifetime of training, his movements precise and economical. The cultists, however, fought with wild abandon fueled by dark magic. Kalen dodged a swing, ducked low, and used the momentum to drive a blade into the cultist's side. As Kalen was momentarily pinned by the dying cultist, the third attacker charged Seraphina, aiming his hook at her neck. Seraphina moved. Her previous stillness vanished, replaced by a terrifying ancient speed. Before the hook could touch her, she erupted in a blur. Her hand wrapped around the cultist's throat, and her eyes flared like twin suns of blood-red power. The cultist dropped, writhing as his dark energy was instantly drained. She looked at Kalen, her gaze searching, questioning. He had betrayed his entire order for her. The vein killer blades, she noted, looking at the blades in his hands. "Elder Lysander must love you very much to give you his finest weapons." "Lysander's love is irrelevant," Kalen retorted, pulling his blade free. He gestured sharply towards the hidden exit he had used. "We need to move. More will come and they will be hunters." They moved fast, Kalen leading the way, his crossbow now aimed behind them, covering Seraphina. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. In a narrow, winding passage, Seraphina finally spoke, her voice quieter, heavier. "The blood shard," she said, naming the artifact. "The council believes I stole it. But they are blind. The shadow cult unearthed it, and it seeks to harness its power. A power that can strip life from all living things, human and immortal alike. I was hunting the cult to destroy the shard." "Why did you let the council believe you stole it?" Kalen challenged. "Because they would have pursued the shard for themselves," Seraphina countered with cold certainty. "Lysander does not want peace, he wants supremacy. He wants a weapon he can wield to eradicate us. The council's paranoia is their weakness." Kalen's chest tightened. Lysander, his mentor, the man who raised him, had always preached duty and protection. Was it possible Lysander's zeal had twisted into something darker? The doubt he felt earlier solidified into a terrifying suspicion. His family's death. His purpose. Everything might have been based on a lie. They reached a fissure in the rock face, a tiny escape route Kalen had marked earlier. "You have two choices, Hunter," Seraphina said, turning to face him, the flickering torchlight making her eyes seem even more intense. "You can kill me now, regain your honor with the council, and go back to your lie. Or you can come with me, become the most hunted man alive, and discover the truth about the blood shard and your precious creed." Kalen looked at the path back, the path of certainty, of honor, of hate. He saw the cold approval of Lysander and the endless, lonely grind of the hunter's life. Then he looked at Seraphina, the forbidden, the deadly, the beautiful enemy. He saw her vulnerability when the cult attacked, and the weight of centuries in her eyes. The idea of protecting her, of fighting for a shared truth, was a terrifying, exhilarating draw. He looked down at the blood of the cultist still staining his coat. He was already a traitor. Kalen lowered his crossbow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his hunter's sigil, a small, silver raven. He dropped it onto the dirt, the sound small yet final. "I am Kalen Thorn," he said, his voice firm, echoing with a new, dangerous resolve. "I do not go back to lies. From this moment I am your protector. Tell me where we go next." Seraphina smiled, a small, genuine expression that transformed her face, making her look both ancient and devastatingly young. "To the forgotten city of Ethelgard," she whispered. "Where the shard was first discovered. And where Lysander will send everyone to kill us." The journey to Ethelgard was a brutal test of survival and an even greater trial of trust. Kalen and Seraphina moved under the cloak of night, avoiding main roads, clinging to the forgotten paths that snaked through desolate forests and across treacherous mountain passes. Each rustle of leaves, each distant howl, could be a hunter's patrol or a rogue vampire looking for an easy meal. Kalen, ever the pragmatist, maintained a vigilant watch. His senses, honed by years of hunting, were now used to protect his former prey. Seraphina, though powerful, moved with a quiet grace, her ancient wisdom her only shield against the modern world. Their conversations were sparse, often punctuated by long stretches of uncomfortable silence. Kalen struggled to reconcile the image of the bloodthirsty fiend from the hunter's creed with the weary, enigmatic woman beside him. He found himself studying her, watching the way her eyes seemed to absorb the moonlight, the subtle shifts in her expressions. One night, while resting in a hidden cave, Kalen finally broke the silence. "Why do you still exist?" he asked, his voice low. "Vampires are monsters. They feed on humans." Serafina turned to him, her ruby eyes reflecting the small, flickering fire. "Do you think all humans are saints, Kalen Thorne? Do they not prey on each other? On the weak, the vulnerable, the innocent?" She paused, her gaze softening slightly. "We are what we are. Some of us choose to live with respect for life, for balance. Others do not. And you?" He pressed. "What do you choose?" "Survival," she said simply. "And to protect my people. And now, to protect the world from the blood shard." She looked at the veinkiller blade strapped to his back. "You have killed many of my kind, Hunter. And you have killed many of mine," Kalen retorted. Serafina's expression grew distant, filled with a sorrow Kalen couldn't quite decipher. "Yes, many. But never without reason, never without consequence. You carry the weight of your kills. So do I. The difference is yours are celebrated. Mine are condemned." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He had always believed his actions were righteous. As days bled into nights, a strange, undeniable attraction began to simmer between them. It was a dangerous undercurrent, a forbidden pull that defied logic and years of ingrained hatred. One evening, Kalen was tending to a small cut on his arm, a minor injury from navigating a treacherous path. Serafina knelt beside him, her long, elegant fingers reaching out. "Let me," she murmured, her voice a soft command. Before he could object, her fingers touched the wound. A cool, tingling sensation spread through his arm, and the cut began to close, the skin knitting together seamlessly. Her touch lingered, sending a jolt through him. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Her eyes, usually so fierce, held a softness he hadn't seen before. The proximity, the forbidden intimacy of her touch, was electrifying. He could feel the dangerous warmth radiating from her, the scent of ancient earth and something intoxicatingly floral clinging to her. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "A small gift," she replied, pulling her hand away. "One of the many you believe are curses." The moment hung heavy in the air, charged with unspoken desires and the stark reality of their impossible situation. He was human, she was vampire. He was a hunter, she was his prey. Yet, in that gaze, those labels dissolved. Their uneasy truce was shattered by the shrill whistle of a hunter's signal arrow piercing the night sky. Kalen instantly pushed Serafina behind a thick cluster of ancient trees. "They found us," he growled, pulling his crossbow into firing position. "Lysander's best." From the shadows, 5 heavily armed hunters emerged, their silver-emblazoned armor glinting under the moonlight. Leading them was Tobias, a seasoned hunter, Kalen's former training partner, and a man known for his unwavering loyalty to Lysander. "Kalen Thorne." Tobias's voice boomed, filled with betrayal and rage. "You have disgraced the creed. Surrender the fiend and your life might be spared." "She is not a fiend, Tobias," Kalen shouted back, his voice resonating with a newfound conviction. "She is being hunted unjustly. You are all being misled." Tobias laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Misled? By Lysander?" "Kalen, your mind has been poisoned by this creature. You were always too soft." Arrows rained down on their position. Kalen returned fire, his bolts finding their mark with deadly accuracy. Serafina moved like a phantom, deflecting arrows with impossible speed, a blur of dark elegance. But she was careful not to kill, only to disarm or disable. "We need to create a diversion," Kalen yelled, reloading his crossbow. "I have an idea," Serafina replied, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "But it requires speed and a great deal of trust." She pointed to an ancient, crumbling watchtower at the edge of the forest, its stone walls barely holding together. "Draw their fire. I will collapse it, creating a path through the valley below. But you must trust one will not collapse it on us." Kalen hesitated for only a second. The trust was terrifying but necessary. "Do it," he commanded, firing another bolt that struck a hunter's shield, sending him stumbling. Serafina gave him a fleeting, intense look. Then she vanished into the shadows, a whisper of dark mist. Kalen knew she was drawing on a deeper, more ancient power. He had just condemned himself further, and placed his life in the hands of the creature he was sworn to destroy. Kalen stood his ground, firing bolt after bolt, his focus absolute. The hunters, led by the furious Tobias, were closing in. He could hear the low, resonant chant building behind him. Serafina was preparing. Suddenly, a wave of ancient, chilling energy swept through the air. The very stones of the watchtower groaned in response to Seraphina's power. The darkness seemed to deepen around her, and Kaelin felt a surge of raw, untamed magic. From the shadows, Seraphina emerged momentarily. Her eyes were not merely red, they were ablaze with an inner light, and dark, almost tangible tendrils of shadow energy snaked out from her hands, wrapping around the base of the crumbling tower. "Now, Kaelin," she commanded, her voice amplified by the force she wielded. With a terrifying crunch, the tower's foundation gave way. A cascade of massive stones and dust erupted, blocking the valley path and engulfing Tobias and his men. The noise was deafening, the air thick with pulverized rock. Kaelin grabbed Seraphina, pulling her into a desperate sprint towards a small, hidden crevice in the canyon wall. They scrambled into the narrow passage, the echo of the collapse fading behind them. They tumbled into a dark space, gasping for breath. The proximity was immediate and intense. Kaelin was acutely aware of the warmth of her body pressed against his, the rapid, shallow rhythm of her breathing. He pushed back, creating a sliver of space, but his eyes were wide with a mix of awe and terror. "That power?" Kaelin murmured, his voice laced with shock. "You brought down a building without touching it. You are what the legends say." Seraphina's face was pale, the exertion clearly draining her. She leaned her head against the cool stone wall. "Legends rarely capture the cost, Kaelin. That power draws from me, and the world hates its manifestation. It makes me a target always." He studied her face, seeing the fatigue, the vulnerability beneath the power. "You could have killed them all. Tobias and the others. Why didn't you?" "Because their deaths would only fuel Lysander's hatred and justify your defection," she stated simply. "And because I do not take life unless it is absolutely necessary for survival." She met his gaze. "Unlike those who hunt us, I can afford to choose mercy." Her quiet conviction was more unsettling than any grand display of force. Kaelin felt the foundations of his black and white world cracking further. Over the next 2 days, as they trekked across rugged terrain, relying on Seraphina's knowledge of ancient trails and Kaelin's hunting skills for sustenance, the emotional distance between them began to close. They began to rely on each other instinctively. One chilly evening, while huddled beneath a canvas tarp during a rainstorm, Seraphina shivered. Kaelin, without thinking, unbuckled his heavy leather trench coat, the armor of his former life, and draped it around her shoulders. Seraphina looked up at him, her lips slightly parted. The act of simple human warmth from a hunter was a monumental gesture. "You should not," she whispered, her voice husky. "We need to survive, Seraphina." "And freezing is inefficient," he replied, trying to keep his tone clinical, but the heat in his chest betrayed him. She didn't argue. She leaned back against the coat, pulling its collar up, the scent of leather and steel a strangely comforting presence. "When I was first turned," Seraphina confided softly, gazing into the rain, "I lost everything. My family, my identity. For a long time, I was only the monster they described. It took centuries to reclaim my humanity. When I look at you, Kaelin, I see a man struggling to define his own humanity, separate from his creed." "I am a monster now too," Kaelin muttered, staring at his hands, hands that had sworn to kill her, yet now protected her. "A traitor to my kind." Seraphina gently placed her hand on his arm, a gesture of comfort, not healing. "No. You are a protector who chose truth over dogma. That is the bravest thing any human or vampire can do." The tension that had simmered for days reached a fever pitch. He was a creature of duty, she was a creature of passion. The rain, the darkness, the shared danger, it all combined into an irresistible force. Kaelin leaned in, his years of discipline dissolving. He closed the distance between them, his kiss a desperate, fierce culmination of their conflict and their shared fate. Seraphina responded with an ancient, fierce passion that instantly consumed him. It was a kiss of fire and ice, duty and defiance, the sealing of a forbidden contract. The emotional release was quickly followed by a stark realization of their peril. Seraphina pulled back, breathless, her eyes clouded with both desire and regret. "The blood shard is calling to them," Seraphina said, her voice shaking slightly, changing the subject abruptly. "I can feel the cultists drawing closer. Kaelin, you need to understand the ultimate danger. It's not just a weapon. It is a focus for all the death that has stained the world. If the shadow cult uses it to complete their ritual in Ethelgard, it will not just kill humans, it will annihilate the very essence of immortality. It will silence all magic and make both our kinds extinct." Kaelin stared at her, the gravity of her words freezing the blood in his veins. The fight wasn't about supremacy or revenge, it was about extinction. He was no longer just protecting his prey, he was fighting for survival itself. "We push on," Kaelin declared, his resolve hardened by their dangerous bond. "We get to Ethelgard first. No matter the cost." Kaelin and Seraphina had increased their speed, driven by the urgency of reaching the ruined outskirts of Ethelgard. The air around the ancient city was heavy, a mix of ancient magic and suppressed dread. Every shadow could hide a hunter or a shadow cultist. While taking shelter beneath a crumbled aqueduct, Seraphina suddenly stopped. Her expression shifted rapidly between relief and tension. "We are not alone," Seraphina whispered. "But these are not Lysander's men." Kalen raised his crossbow, his eyes darting through the darkness. "Who is it?" "Someone I trust implicitly," Seraphina replied, "but he will not trust you at all." From the deepest shadows, a tall, slender figure emerged. This was Cassian, Seraphina's centuries-old loyal lieutenant. His silver-gray hair framed a face etched with countless conflicts. His eyes, predatory and cautious, briefly rested on Seraphina before immediately fixing on Kalen, filled with deep suspicion and open hostility. Cassian's gaze swept over Kalen's hunter's trench coat and the vein-killer blades at his waist. "My queen," Cassian's voice was icy and demanding. "Why are you alone? And what is this hunter doing with you? Is this a trap?" Seraphina stepped forward. "This hunter is now my protector, Cassian. His name is Kalen Thorn, and he has abandoned the hunter's creed and saved my life." Cassian gave a short, bitter laugh. "Seeking protection from the one who was sent to kill her master? This is the oldest trick in the hunter's creed. His eyes still burn with hate, my queen. He will betray you the moment the opportunity arises." Kalen held his ground, his hands firm on the crossbow. "I have abandoned my former life, Cassian. Your queen speaks the truth. Our enemy is the Shadow Cult and the Blood Shard, not each other's species. Your betrayal will not save your kind," Cassian sneered at Kalen. "And I will not allow you to protect her. If he is to be her protector, he must first prove it to me." The tension was suffocating. Seraphina immediately positioned herself between them, her presence commanding obedience. "Enough, both of you," she said firmly. "We do not have time for domestic squabbles. Cassian, do you trust me?" "More than my own life," Cassian replied without hesitation. "Then trust my judgment that he is currently our greatest necessity. His skills, his hunter's knowledge, will help us understand the Shadow Cult's movements." Seraphina then leaned toward Cassian. "Kalen understands the threat of the Blood Shard. I am staking my life on his honesty." Cassian's face shifted from rage to reluctant doubt. He took a deep breath, tightening his lips. "Very well, my queen. But if he shows any ill intent, the first thing I will do is plunge a hunter's blade into his heart. Regardless of your decree." Kalen accepted Cassian's hostility without flinching. He knew that trust had to be earned, and in Cassian's eyes, he was still a hunter, an enemy. Seraphina watched the formation of this fragile truce. "Cassian, your knowledge of Ethelgard is vital. Where in the city is the Shadow Cult likely to perform the ritual?" Seraphina asked, forcing their focus back to the mission. "There is only one place," Cassian stated, his voice now professional. "The Sunken Temple. It is in the lowest part of the city where no light reaches. There they will find the ancient darkness required to harness the Blood Shard's power." Cassian glanced at Kalen. "The path to the temple will be swarming with Lysander's hunters. And the cultist zombie-like sentries, activated by the shard's residual power. We will need your hunter's strategy and my shadowing skills, if you are truly the protector." Kalen accepted the challenge. "My planning will get us where we need to go safely. After that, you decide what I am." Their group was now three: Kalen, the protector hunter, Seraphina, the queen, and Cassian, the loyal skeptic. A new dynamic of dangerous love, loyalty, conflict, and heightened peril had begun. As they reached the broken walls of Ethelgard, Kalen's hunter training took over. The city was not merely a pile of ruins, but a meticulously set trap by Lysander. "Stop," Kalen commanded with a raised hand. Both Seraphina and Cassian froze. "What is it?" Cassian asked with suspicion. "I see nothing." "And that is Lysander's purpose," Kalen whispered, his eyes meticulously scanning the ground and surrounding structures. "We cannot go this way. Ahead are silver-laced tripwires. If you touch them, no matter how fast you are, they will trigger noise grenades. The entire Hunter Council will know exactly where we are." Seraphina looked at Kalen, surprised. "How do you know this?" "I helped design these traps," Kalen replied flatly. "Lysander always sets blind spots near entry points. He assumes an enemy will only watch the open spaces. But a hunter knows the greatest danger is what is hidden." Kalen drew marks on the damp earth. "We cannot pass through the marketplace. We will use the old sewers below. That section is considered too dirty and too dangerous for the Hunter Council, but it is safe for us." Cassian vehemently shook his head. "The sewers? They are filled with stalker ghouls. They don't need sunlight to thrive. They are far more dangerous than hunters." "The ghouls know the hunters don't enter there," Kalen countered. "But they don't know the vampire queen will. And if we kill them, they won't make noise. The Hunter Council must remain unaware of our presence. That is our priority. Serafina looked at Cashin. Kalen is correct. By knowing the Hunter's Creed's rules, we can break them. Let's go, Protector. Cashin glowered at Kalen but deferred to Serafina. To him, Kalen was still a hunter, but his hunter's knowledge was now their crucial lifeline. The sewers were a putrid, claustrophobic nightmare. The darkness was dense, and the air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay. Kalen led the way, his breathing controlled, every step cautious. Serafina was close behind, while Cashin brought up the rear, his eyes fixed on Kalen. At one point they crossed a wide chamber. Suddenly, Cashin's acute vampire senses detected danger. Stop. We are cornered, Cashin yelled. From 3 directions, 3 large, hideous ghouls lunged towards them, their eyes yellowed and their limbs long and sharp. Cashin immediately shoved Serafina behind him. My queen, you handle the hunter. I will handle these. But Kalen was already in motion. He shoved Cashin aside with one hand. Out of the way, Cashin. You cannot kill them silently. Kalen snarled. He didn't use his crossbow. Instead, he pulled 2 small black-tipped daggers from his coat, not silver but a rare poison-laced alloy. Kalen struck lightning fast, plunging both daggers into the nearest ghoul's spinal cord and eye simultaneously. The ghoul dropped to the ground without a sound, his body instantly paralyzed and swiftly lifeless. The other 2 ghouls tried to attack Serafina, but Kalen, moving with a human hunter's deadly speed, intercepted them. He used his boot to crush the neck of one ghoul and rammed the handle of a veinkiller blade into the mouth of the second ghoul, stifling both its breath and its scream. The 3 ghouls lay in silent death. Kalen cleaned his weapons, his breathing barely disturbed. No noise. No alarm. Cashin, who was about to tear the ghouls apart with his claws, froze in astonishment. He witnessed Kalen not only save their lives but also preserve the crucial element of surprise against the Hunter Council. Kalen looked at Serafina, who was still visibly astounded. What was that? Serafina asked quietly. Hunter Council training, Kalen answered. We are taught to silent kill ghouls and low-level vampires so that the Council's main targets are kept unaware. These ghouls are dead. But the city is still asleep. Kalen then looked pointedly at Cashin. I will protect your queen in silence, Cashin. That is my oath. Cashin lowered his gaze. His face was still rigid with anger, but the suspicion in his eyes was giving way to unwilling respect. Let's move, Cashin said grudgingly, his voice holding a hint of acceptance for the first time. The sunken temple of Ethelgard is not far. Now we are using the mind of the Hunter's Creed against itself. The sunken temple was not a place of worship, but a mausoleum of forgotten power. Kalen, Serafina, and Cashin emerged from the sewer tunnels into a vast underground cavern. The air here was heavy, not with decay but with raw, unstable magic. The chamber was circular, and in its center stood a crumbling stone altar. Surrounding the altar were 24 robed figures, the shadow cultists. They were chanting in a low, resonant language that scraped against Kalen's nerves. On the altar, the object of the entire hunt lay suspended in a field of shimmering dark energy, the blood shard. It was a jagged crystal, pulsing with a deep, sickly red light, drawing all the ambient shadow toward it. They took cover high in the shadows of the cavern's ledges. Kalen surveyed the layout with professional intensity. There are too many, he whispered, resting his crossbow on a cracked stone railing. We rush in and will be overwhelmed before we reach the shard. We must wait for the ritual to peak, Serafina hissed, her eyes locked onto the crystal. When the shard is fully activated, its power will be volatile. That will be our only chance to strike and shatter it. Cashin pointed to the cultists. Look at their leader. Standing closest to the shard, directing the ritual, was a figure whose robe was embroidered with silver thread, signifying seniority. This leader moved with a familiar, dangerous authority. Kalen instinctively felt a sharp dread. As the chanting reached a fever pitch, the leaders slowly lowered their hood, revealing their face. It was Elias. Serafina let out a small, strangled gasp, a sound of shock and deep, ancient pain. Kalen instinctively reached out, gripping her arm to steady her. Elias was a vampire Serafina had thought she defeated centuries ago. He was her former confidant and a rival for the throne of the ancient vampire council. Elias had always preached the superiority of their kind, but he believed in seizing all power, human and magical. Serafina had exiled him for his reckless ambition. His features were sharp and cruel, his eyes now glowing with the same unholy red as the blood shard itself. Serafina vain, Elias's voice boomed across the chamber, though he hadn't looked up. I know you are here. Did you truly believe your pathetic human protector could hide you from a power that spans millennia? Serafina was momentarily paralyzed by the revelation. He knew I would track the shard, she murmured, a terrifying realization dawning on her. He didn't steal it, He used the theft to lure me here. He needs my ancient life force to complete the ritual. Cassian drew his dagger. We move now, my queen. Before he traps us. Elias, still focused on the shard, smiled thinly. I prepared for your human ally as well, Kaelin Thorne. The hunter's creed is predictable. They rely on their informants. Elias snapped his fingers. From a narrow passage opposite their hiding spot, two figures emerged. They were hunters, clad in the familiar dark leather and silver armor. But one of them was Tobias, Kaelin's former training partner, whom Kaelin thought he had left buried under rubble. And the second figure was Elder Lysander. Lysander looked neither at the blood shard nor at Elias. His eyes went directly to Kaelin, perched high in the shadows. His face was a mask of cold, devastating fury. You should never have abandoned your faith, Kaelin. Lysander's voice resonated with absolute authority. Your sentimental weakness has led you straight to the heart of the enemy. And now you will pay the final price for your betrayal. Kaelin realized the true horrifying scope of the conspiracy. 1. Elias, the cult leader, wanted the blood shard to gain ultimate power and needed Seraphina's life force. 2. Lysander, the hunter leader, didn't want the blood shard destroyed. He wanted Elias to complete the ritual, believing he could then seize the perfected weapon and use it to eradicate all vampires, including Seraphina. He had been using the cult as a means to an end. Lysander is working with him. Kaelin exclaimed, the betrayal of bitter acid in his mouth. He wants the shard too. Not with me, you pitiful hunter, Elias sneered, finally turning to face Lysander. You are just as much a tool as your little traitor. Once the shard is complete, I will control its power, and vampires will rule the dust of both your species. The air crackled. The cultists intensified their chant. The blood shard began to vibrate violently, emitting pulses of deadly red energy. Kaelin, Seraphina, and Cassian were trapped between a furious hunter council, a power-hungry vampire cult, and the imminent activation of an extinction-level weapon. The time for strategy was over. Seraphina, Kaelin roared, pulling out his veinkiller blades. This is it. We fight or we die. The chamber erupted. Kaelin had no time for thought, only instinct mattered. Seraphina, the shard. Cassian, protect her flank. Kaelin roared, his voice cutting through the rising terror. He didn't wait. Kaelin launched himself from the ledge, descending rapidly toward the chamber floor. He had to draw Lysander away from the center of the fight, away from Seraphina. Kaelin landed lightly, rolling and immediately spinning to face his former mentor. Lysander, flanked by Tobias and 3 other hardened hunters, approached with deliberate, icy steps. You chose a creature over your kin, Kaelin, Lysander sneered, drawing his massive silver-tipped sword, the Creed blade. Your parents' sacrifice meant nothing to you. My parents' sacrifice meant I should fight lies. Elder, Kaelin shot back, pulling his veinkiller blades free. You used my hatred. You sent me here to die so you could claim a weapon of mass extinction. You betrayed the Creed, not I. Their blades met with a furious clang. Lysander was older, but his power was immense, fueled by decades of fanaticism. Kaelin was faster, fighting with the reckless abandon of a man who had nothing left to lose but the woman he loved. Kaelin parried a powerful overhead strike. The impact jarred his arms, but he used the rebound to pivot and slash at Lysander's exposed side. Lysander was forced to retreat a step, a flicker of surprise crossing his rigid face. You have grown soft, Kaelin, Lysander hissed, but the effort in his defense betrayed his words. That fiend has dulled your edge. Meanwhile, Seraphina and Cassian engaged the shadow cultists. Cassian fought with disciplined, centuries-old ferocity, tearing through the robed figures to clear a path. Seraphina moved directly toward the altar, her primary goal the blood shard. Elias, this ends now. Seraphina commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of the ancient queens. Elias smirked, his hand still hovering over the pulsing red crystal. How romantic, Seraphina. You brought your entire bloodline to be extinguished. Your power will be the final spark for my new world order. Elias didn't attack directly. Instead, he raised his hands and 3 massive shadow skeletons, reanimated corpses powered by the shard's dark magic, rose from the chamber floor, moving to intercept Seraphina and Cassian. Cassian, draw them away. Seraphina ordered. She needed a clean shot at the shard. Cassian nodded grimly, knowing the skeletal behemoths were a perfect match for his own dark speed. He led the shadow skeletons on a deadly chase around the altar, drawing the cultists' attention. Seraphina used the diversion. She channeled her ancient energy, her eyes shining brilliantly. She gathered a ball of pure, condensed light, a terrifying counter to the shard's darkness, aimed at shattering the crystal. Kaelin was quickly driven to the defense by Lysander's relentless attacks. Tobias and the other hunters closed in, creating a deadly circle. And him, Tobias. He is unworthy. Lysander commanded. Kalen dodged Tobias's quick thrust, knowing he couldn't fight Lysander and the others simultaneously. He needed leverage. He saw Seraphina preparing her attack on the shard. If she shattered it now, the resulting magical explosion could kill everyone, including them. But if Elias completed the ritual, they would all die anyway. Kalen made a tactical decision. He blocked a blow from Lysander with his left blade, and with his right, he launched the vein killer into the air, spinning toward Tobias. The blade found its mark, piercing Tobias's shield arm. With Tobias down, Kalen had a moment. He quickly disengaged from Lysander, rolling toward a pillar. Seraphina. No. Kalen yelled, realizing she was about to make a fatal move. Shattering it will destroy the chamber. It has to be nullified. Seraphina paused, her light ball flickering, confused. Elias saw his chance. Fools. You listen to a human, Seraphina? Elias laughed, and with a swift gesture, he hurled a concentrated bolt of pure darkness at Seraphina. Kalen knew he couldn't reach her in time. His blood ran cold as he saw his worst fear about to materialize. Elias's bolt of pure darkness hurtled towards Seraphina, intended to strip her life force and complete the blood shards ritual. Kalen saw the death in the air, the end of everything they fought for. He didn't hesitate. Kalen roared and launched himself across the gap, tackling Seraphina to the side with crushing force. They slammed into the cold stone floor just as the bolt of black energy impacted the spot where Seraphina had stood. The energy didn't dissipate. Instead, it spread rapidly, consuming the stone and leaving behind a smoking, lifeless void. Kalen shielded Seraphina with his own body. While the direct hit was avoided, the residual, volatile energy of the blood shard lashed out, striking Kalen's left shoulder. A searing, unimaginable pain tore through him. He screamed, a sound ripped from the deepest part of his soul. The skin around the wound immediately blackened, and the flesh began to rapidly decay, consumed by the artifact's dark magic. Kalen. Seraphina cried, scrambling up to support him. Pathetic, Elias sneered from the altar. The protector is merely a shield and now he is broken. The darkness will consume you slowly, Hunter. Lysander, momentarily distracted by the violence, seized the opportunity. He lunged toward Kalen with the Creed blade, seeing his chance to execute the traitor. Die a martyr to your weakness, Thorn. Lysander shouted. Kalen was too weakened by the wound to defend himself against Lysander's attack. His left arm was useless, the pain paralyzing. In a terrifying display of primal ferocity, Seraphina reacted. She didn't use light magic, she used her fundamental vampiric nature. She sank her fangs deep into Kalen's neck, just above the collarbone. A gasp escaped Kalen's lips, mingling pain with a sudden, overwhelming rush of energy. It was a terrifying, addictive flood of dark power and ancient life force surging into his veins. It was the forbidden act, the sharing of the immortal bond. Lysander skidded to a halt, his eyes wide with horror and disgust. Abomination. You have been tainted. Seraphina pulled away, a single drop of Kalen's human blood staining her chin, but her eyes were blazing with renewed, potent power. She had given him a fraction of her own strength, enough to fight the darkness and survive Lysander. He is not tainted, Elder. Seraphina's voice was low and dangerous. He is bound. Attack him and you attack me. Kalen felt the venomous black decay in his shoulder momentarily halt. His exhaustion vanished, replaced by a reckless, exhilarating strength. He staggered to his feet, facing Lysander, his eyes reflecting the dark power that now coursed through him. Kalen knew the borrowed power was temporary. He had to think fast. Seraphina. Nullification. Kalen gasped, pointing at the shard with his good arm. You can't shatter it. You have to absorb its energy and then release it into the Earth's natural currents. Purge it, don't break it. Seraphina's eyes widened with understanding. The ancient knowledge resurfaced. The convergence point, underneath the altar. Elias scoffed. The convergence point is sealed by centuries of warding. You cannot reach it without a total focus on the shard. I can distract the shard, Kalen declared. He pointed to the crystalline structure. The shard is being fed by the ritual, but it is weakest at its base connection. If I can sever the flow of the ritual's energy, you'll have the opening. Kalen looked at Cashin, who was still locked in combat with the shadow skeletons. Cashin met his gaze and gave a quick, sharp nod, a silent acknowledgement of Kalen's loyalty and sacrifice. The final plan was set. 1. Kalen and Cashin would create a massive distraction, engaging both the hunters and Elias's cultists, and simultaneously sever the shard's energy flow. 2. Seraphina would use the distraction to reach the altar, open the ancient wards, and nullify the blood shard at the convergence point, saving the world but draining her utterly. Lysander. Your final judgment is here. Kalen yelled, charging straight into the heart of the hunter's line, his single-minded focus on the creed blade of his former mentor. The battle for extinction had begun. Kalen roared, the borrowed vampiric energy of burning, alien fire in his veins, masking the crippling pain in his shoulder. He charged Lysander, forcing the hunters into a defensive circle. He was a human fighting with the speed of a vampire, driven by the fierce urgency of a protector. You are nothing but a broken tool. Lysander yelled, meeting Kalen's assault. Their blades clashed in a dazzling shower of sparks. Lysander was momentarily thrown off balance by Kalen's reckless, unfamiliar strength. While Kalen held the attention of the hunters, Cashin dispatched the last of the shadow skeletons with brutal efficiency. He looked at Kalen, his respect no longer grudging but absolute. Cashin sprinted towards the altar, using the cultist's focus on the shard to his advantage. He needed to clear the immediate path for Seraphina. Vain matriarch. Cashin called out, his voice sharp and loud. The protector is drawing the fire. Go. Seraphina nodded, already moving with focused speed. She raced toward the stone altar, which glowed ominously under the influence of the blood shard. Kalen understood their synchronicity instantly. He dodged a thrust from Lysander and deliberately crashed into a stone column near the altar's base. Cashin. Sever the flow. Kalen shouted. Below the shard. Now. Cashin launched himself onto the altar. Elias, finally realizing the true danger, turned from the shard to intercept him. You will not touch the source worm. Elias snarled, attacking Cashin with ancient, venomous claw strikes. Cashin was forced to defend, but his positioning was perfect. He blocked Elias's attack, driving his dagger downward, not at Elias, but at the connection point beneath the crystal. The dagger struck an intricate carving, and a shower of small dark sparks erupted. The powerful resonance of the ritual momentarily faltered. The fractional interruption was all Seraphina needed. She reached the altar and plunged both hands into the stone, ignoring the scorching magical feedback. She was channeling her deepest, most ancient powers, the power Kalen had tapped into. Ancient Earth, hear me. Seraphina's voice was a deep, powerful chant. I sacrifice my source for the nullification. The altar stone began to crack and glow white-hot. Seraphina was forcing open the convergence point, the Earth's own magical circuit breaker. Elias screamed in fury, realizing his ultimate weapon was about to be turned against him. He pushed Cashin aside and lunged at Seraphina, aiming a crippling blow at her exposed back. Kalen saw the imminent threat. He knew Lysander was closing in, but Elias was the primary danger. With a superhuman burst of speed, Kalen disengaged from Lysander, leaving his mentor momentarily bewildered. Kalen launched himself towards the altar, tackling Elias just inches from Seraphina. They tumbled onto the ground. Elias, driven by desperate power, fought with the savagery of a cornered beast. He was an ancient vampire, but Kalen was a hunter powered by borrowed immortality and human rage. Kalen grabbed a heavy stone shard from the shattered column and, with all the strength left in his usable arm, slammed it into Elias's head. Elias staggered, his focus broken. The protector protects. Kalen snarled, spitting the words with finality. But the distraction cost him. Lysander was upon him in a flash, the creed blade aimed for Kalen's heart. Farewell, traitor. Lysander cried, rage twisting his features. The silver blade plunged downward. Kalen tried to roll, but the lingering paralysis from the shadow cult's poison in his shoulder was too much. The creed blade struck deep, but not into his heart. It skewered the shoulder and upper chest, embedding itself with agonizing finality in the very flesh that Seraphina had protected. Kalen gasped, the world dissolving into searing white pain. At that precise moment, the convergence point opened. A blinding, sapphire blue light erupted from the altar, instantly overriding the sickly red glow of the blood shard. Seraphina, her face drawn and utterly exhausted, screamed as she directed the energy. The blue light shot outwards not as an explosion but as a wave of purging energy. It washed over the cultists, instantly dissolving their dark magic and rendering them powerless. It washed over Lysander and his hunters, neutralizing the silver in their weapons and causing their armor to crumble to dust. It washed over the blood shard, which pulsed once, then fractured and collapsed into harmless, gray dust. When the light faded, only silence remained. Lysander stood frozen, his creed blade buried deep in Kalen's shoulder, his eyes wide with shock. The power was gone. His world, his zealous crusade, was over. Seraphina collapsed onto the altar, drained of almost all strength. Cashin rushed to her side, then looked to Kalen, who was slumped against the stone, the sword still in his chest. The protector had won the war, but at the cost of his life. The deep silence of the chamber was broken only by the drip of water and Kalen's ragged, shallow breathing. The sapphire light of the nullification had faded, leaving behind a chamber littered with dust and fallen enemies. Seraphina was the first to move. Despite her utter exhaustion from channeling the vast purging energy, she clawed her way off the altar and staggered toward Kaelin. Cassian, already by their side, yanked Elias's dagger from the floor and quickly checked Kaelin's pulse, his eyes grim. The Creed blade is silver, my queen. The poison from the shadow cult and the power you gave him. They're fighting for control. If we pull the sword, he dies from blood loss. If we leave it, the silver will burn him from the inside out. Seraphina knelt beside Kaelin, ignoring the burning pain in her own hands. She looked at the twisted, fanatical face of Lysander, who stood motionless, staring at the dust where his ultimate weapon had been. You failed, Elder. Seraphina's voice was barely a whisper, thick with exhaustion, but laced with ancient contempt. You traded your faith for a myth, and now you have nothing. Not even your honor. Lysander didn't move, his obsession broken by the failure of the shard. Seraphina turned back to Kaelin. She knew what she had to do. The forbidden bond she had initiated in the previous chapter had to be completed to save him. She gently lifted Kaelin's head. I gave you a spark, my protector. Now I give you the fire. She sank her fangs deep into his neck again. This time she didn't just share power, she performed a desperate, ancient act of vampiric transfusion. She poured a significant portion of her own vital, immortal life force into his human body, fighting the silver and the cult's poison with pure, concentrated power. Kaelin arched his back, a raw, choked cry escaping him. The infusion was overwhelming. He felt the rapid, agonizing transformation of his human cells fighting the silver and simultaneously accepting the gift of immortality. The wound stopped bleeding. The black decay receded, battling the silver's burn. Seraphina pulled away, gasping. The cost was immense, her face was drawn, her red eyes dim, and her strength was almost entirely spent. She looked more fragile than Kaelin had ever seen her. Pull it, Cassian, she commanded, her voice barely audible. Cassian, his hands shaking slightly, gripped the hilt of the Creed blade and yanked it free. The wound instantly sealed itself, leaving a deep, silvery scar that pulsed with a faint, dark light. Kaelin gasped, his eyes flying open. They were still blue, but there was a new, frightening depth to them. A shadow of red, the mark of his blood price. Lysander, Kaelin whispered, his voice rough and changed. Lysander finally stirred. He looked at Kaelin, a man he had raised, now tainted and saved by the very creature he was sworn to destroy. He dropped his powerless blade. You are nothing now, Kaelin, Lysander spat, his voice devoid of his former rage, replaced by desolate despair. Neither human nor creature. You are an outcast. We are survivors, Seraphina countered, rising slowly. And you, Elder, are powerless. Kaelin tried to stand, leaning heavily on Seraphina. His body was a battlefield of warring forces, but he was alive. We have to move, Kaelin rasped. The nullification won't last. The council will send legions when they realize Lysander has failed. Cassian helped them. He looked at the defeated Lysander. Do we kill him, my queen? Seraphina looked at Kaelin, whose gaze was fixed on his former mentor. Kaelin had a single terrible choice, revenge or mercy. No, Kaelin said, his voice surprisingly firm. He lives to see his creed crumble. That is a fate worse than death for him. They left Lysander standing alone amidst the dust and the ruins of his crusade. Cassian led the way out of the sunken temple and back into the sewer tunnels. Kaelin leaned against Seraphina, his body a strange mix of human weakness and terrifying new strength. The kiss of the vampire had saved him, but it had irrevocably changed him. He was no longer just the protector. He was an abomination, bound forever to his prey. As they slipped into the perpetual night, the finality of their new life settled upon them. They were fugitives, a hybrid creation. The human vampire hunter, now marked as a creature of the night, and his vampire queen, now his bonded guardian. They moved through the network of abandoned tunnels, Cassian leading the way. The physical journey was grueling, but for Kaelin, the internal journey was a terrifying, exhilarating nightmare. He was alive, but he wasn't human. The moment Seraphina's life force fused with his, Kaelin's world had changed. His vision was startlingly sharp. He could see the dust motes dancing in the faint light and the minute etchings on the tunnel walls with impossible clarity. His hearing was a constant, overwhelming roar, the scuttling of insects miles away, the distant rush of water, the faint, erratic thump of his own slowed heart. The change was most acute in his body. The silver scar on his shoulder pulsed faintly, a reminder of the battle won and the humanity lost. He felt an intense, gnawing hunger, not for food but for something vital, something warm. He recognized the thirst for blood, and the realization sent a wave of chilling self-loathing through him. It is the bloodthirst, Seraphina whispered, sensing his distress as they paused in a dark recess. It is part of the bond. You are not a full vampire, but you possess my strength and my needs. You must learn to control it. Control it? Kalen's voice was a rough whisper. He looked at Serafina, his eyes wide and panicked. I was created to kill this need. I fought my entire life to be human and now I am, what? A monster? Serafina gently touched his face, her touch cool against his feverish skin. You are mine, Kalen. And you are a protector who sacrificed his humanity for a greater truth. You are the only one of your kind. We will face the thirst together. She leaned in, her eyes reflecting the crimson shade of her commitment. You will never hurt an innocent. If the thirst becomes too much, I will give you what you need. Only my blood. The bond is complete. You can feed only on me. The confession was raw, desperate, and utterly intimate. The physical change had solidified their impossible relationship. They were not just lovers, they were symbiotic. Serafina was his life source and he was her immortal guardian. Cashin, watching from a distance, saw the terrible commitment in his queen's eyes and finally, truly accepted the hunter. They spent the next day finding a safe, secluded crypt to rest. Kalen struggled constantly with his heightened senses and the crushing weight of his new reality. He had been defined by his mission, now he was defined by his prey. Where do we go? Kalen asked, looking at Serafina, who was sleeping to conserve her drained energy. Cashin was sitting guard. To the northern wastes, Cashin replied quietly. A place where the ancient vampire strongholds exist, far from the Hunter Council. There are others who reject Elias's ambition and Lysander's zealotry. They can offer sanctuary, but it will be a life in the shadows. And the hunters? Lysander is broken, but the creed remains, Cashin said, cleaning his dagger. They will track you down. Not just for betraying them, but for what you have become. You are a living insult to their entire doctrine. But now that you have our strength, you can be their downfall. Kalen looked at the silver scar on his shoulder, the mark of the bond. He was the hunter who had fallen for the prey, and now he was permanently etched with her power. The world would forever hunt them, but they had each other. Then let them hunt, Kalen said, his voice now deeper, steadier, fueled by a new, dangerous resolve. They will find the protector is faster, stronger, and more lethal than the hunter ever was. He looked at Serafina's sleeping form, his commitment reaffirmed. He would be her shield, her strength, and her sanctuary for the rest of his life, a life that was now forever. The journey to the northern wastes was a continuous, grueling trial for Kalen. The high mountains and desolate plains were unforgiving, but the greatest threat was internal. Kalen's body, now a vessel of both human spirit and immortal power, constantly fought itself. The bloodthirst was a constant, relentless whisper in his mind. His new senses, hyper-aware of every heartbeat, every pulse of warmth within a mile, made the urge almost unbearable. He found himself focusing on Serafina's strong, steady rhythm, the source of his new life, to drown out the sounds of the natural world. One evening, while resting in a blizzard-swept cave, the hunger became a roar. Kalen watched Cashin carve thin slices of dried meat. The smell was suddenly repulsive and inadequate. His eyes locked onto the pulsating vein in Cashin's neck. Kalen squeezed his hands into fists until the nails drew blood. The struggle was agonizing. Kalen, Serafina's voice was sharp. She saw the shadow of red in his eyes, the predatory focus that terrified him more than any hunter. I need to be away from you, Kalen choked out, stumbling to the mouth of the cave. I can't guarantee control. Serafina followed him, pulling him back into the relative warmth. The bond is a shield, protector, but you must learn to wield it. Look at me, Kalen. I am the source of your strength and I am your anchor. She took his hand and placed it on her neck, just over her thrumming carotid artery. Take only my blood when you need it. We are one in this now. You cannot turn into the monster Lysander painted you as. Refuse the fear. Kalen's hand trembled, the heat of her skin an overwhelming temptation. But the trust in her eyes, the sheer vulnerability of the queen placing her life in his hands, was stronger than the thirst. He pulled his hand back, gasping, the immediate crisis averted. Their moment of intimacy was shattered by a low, feral growl echoing from the blizzard. Cashin was instantly on alert. Ice stalkers, Cashin hissed. Low-level, feral mountain vampires. They feed indiscriminately. They hunt by scent and Kalen's new smell, it will drive them mad. 3 creatures, pale and distorted, with teeth like shards of ice, emerged from the snow. Kalen, you need to prove your control now, Serafina commanded. Use your speed, but show them your hunter's heart. Kalen felt a terrifying rush of strength. He was faster than the stalkers. His old self would have used silver. His new self knew how to disable them silently, efficiently, and without the need for blood. He launched himself into the blizzard. The fight was a blur of motion. Kalen dodged the first creature's lunge, his movements perfected by years of training and magnified by Serafina's power. He used a move Lysander had taught him, a swift, paralyzing blow to the spine, and brought the creature down instantly. The second stalker tried to bite. Kalen caught its arm midair, and with a shocking, effortless twist, snapped the bone. He didn't kill, he neutralized. The third stalker turned to flee, sensing the terrifying hybrid power of their attacker. Kalen was on it in a flash, pressing the point of his vein-killer blade against its throat. Go, Kalen commanded, his voice a low, chilling growl. You will not feed here. The stalker fled into the snow. Kalen returned, his heart pounding, his body humming with dangerous energy. He had fought like a vampire but with the restraint of a hunter. Cassian looked at the neutralized creatures, then at Kalen. His suspicion finally melted away. You have the speed of our kind, and the honor of a true warrior, Cassian conceded, sheathing his dagger. The bond has not corrupted your soul. Seraphina stepped forward, her relief visible. She didn't ask, she simply reached out and took Kalen's hand. You won, my protector, she whispered. You saved your humanity by embracing the truth of your strength. Kalen looked at the hand that had almost taken life and then saved it. He was now a hybrid guardian, defined not by his thirst, but by his choice to refuse it. The northern wastes were a cold sanctuary, but in their shared purpose, they had finally found warmth. After days of relentless travel through the snow-laden peaks, Cassian finally led them to the hidden entrance of the northern stronghold, a vast, Gothic fortress carved deep into the heart of a frozen mountain. This was the bastion of ancient vampire civilization, shielded by powerful, centuries-old wards from both sunlight and human encroachment. The moment they crossed the threshold, the hostility was palpable. Dozens of tall, pale vampires materialized from the shadows, their expressions a mix of awe for their queen and intense, murderous suspicion toward the man at her side. Seraphina, though still recovering, walked with the regal confidence of a monarch. She led Kalen and Cassian into the great hall, a cavernous chamber lit by cold, ethereal blue flame. Seated around a massive, obsidian table were the elder vampires of the northern courts, ancient creatures who had deliberately distanced themselves from the recent conflicts of the human world. They were figures of immense power, their eyes holding little warmth or mercy. A male elder, Lord Forlag, whose skin was as pale as marble and whose robes were embroidered with faded gold, addressed Seraphina with chilling formality. Seraphina Vane, Forlag's voice echoed, ancient and dry. You return as a fugitive, stripped of your power and accompanied by a hunter. He pointed a long, skeletal finger at Kalen. And worse, a tainted one. Explain this outrage. The hall buzzed with venomous whispers. Kalen felt the sheer force of their collective animosity. These were not the feral stalkers. These were rulers and their prejudice was absolute. Seraphina held her head high, her gaze sweeping over the elders. I return to seek sanctuary not for myself, but for the future of our kind, she stated clearly. The blood shard was hours away from completing a ritual that would have led to the annihilation of all immortal life. Elias, corrupted by power, worked in concert with Elder Lysander of the Hunter's Creed. A wave of shocked disbelief rippled through the elders. The Hunters allied with our kind? Forlag scoffed. A lie. A truth paid for by the loss of my ancient energy and the humanity of my protector, Seraphina countered, gripping Kalen's arm. This man, Kalen Thorn, risked his life, defied his creed, and accepted a fraction of my life force to fight Lysander, sever the ritual flow, and ensure the nullification of the shard. She looked at Kalen. He is now bound to me, sharing my strength and my fate. He is the shield that saved us all. The elders stared at Kalen not with fear but with profound disgust. A hybrid abomination, pronounced Lady Alara, a cruel-eyed elder. You ask us to shelter the creature that saved you? His very existence is an insult to our purity. He is still a hunter, wearing his former armor and smelling of human spite. He must be destroyed, Queen, to cleanse this sanctuary. Kalen felt the thirst and the rage flare, a primal response to their condemnation. He had saved them and they sought to kill him simply for existing. He does not smell of human spite, Cassian interjected, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with Kalen, a potent show of support. He smells of sacrifice. He nearly died to spare us. He chose restraint over instinct when he faced the stalkers. His loyalty is proven. A loyal human is still a human, Lord Forlag retorted. He knows our weaknesses, he knows our locations. He is a spy, Queen, whether he knows it or not. Kalen knew silence would be his demise. He stepped forward, pushing the raw, unfamiliar power to the surface, causing his eyes to flash with a crimson shadow. I am Kalen Thorn, he declared, his voice ringing with a mix of human conviction and immortal depth. I have no loyalty to the creed which proved itself hollow. I have no ambition for your throne. My only purpose is to protect Seraphina Vane and to ensure the survival of those who seek peace. He threw his veinkiller blades onto the obsidian table with a defiant clang. "Take these weapons," Kalen challenged, his gaze sweeping the elders. "Lock me away. Kill me if you must. But know this, the hunters are still out there, Lysander is still alive, and they will find this stronghold. If you wish to survive the war to come, you will need someone who thinks like them, fights like us, and is driven by truth, not dogma." Lord Forlag leaned back, assessing the formidable blend of human audacity and raw vampire power radiating from the hybrid. The ancient prejudice was fighting the stark reality of the threat. "We will not destroy you today, Hunter," Forlag finally said, a reluctant agreement in his voice. "But you will not be free. You will remain within the deep cells, guarded, until the fate of the northern courts is decided. Your life, Kalen Thorne, remains forfeit." Seraphina stepped forward, her face a mask of fierce resolve. "If he is forfeit, then I too am a prisoner. And the price of your sanctuary will be the absence of your queen's strength." Kalen was led away immediately by two silent guards, massive ancient vampires with blank, emotionless faces. He was stripped of his outer hunter's gear, leaving him in simple dark cloth, and ushered deep into the mountain fortress. The deep cells were carved from the solid, light-absorbing bedrock, designed to contain the most dangerous of their kind. Kalen's cell was a cramped, cold space devoid of light. The sheer darkness was an oppressive force, a natural enemy to his human half, yet strangely comforting to the vampire essence now flowing through his veins. The separation from Seraphina was an immediate, physical pain. The bond, which had been a rush of power and shared strength, now felt like a severed nerve. He could sense her distress, the weight of the hostile court she was facing, but he couldn't reach her. His new senses amplified his loneliness. He sat in the pitch black, grappling with the agonizing realization of his transformation. He was no longer Kalen Thorne, the disciplined hunter. He was a creature of the dark, confined by the very people he had saved. "I gave up everything for this," the human part of him screamed. "You secured her safety. You survived," the vampire part coldly asserted. Above, in the great hall, Seraphina was fighting a different kind of war. The elders, led by the obstinate Lord Forlag, used Kalen's imprisonment as leverage to weaken her influence. "Your affection for the hybrid compromises your judgment," Queen Forlag declared, pacing before the obsidian table. "We cannot trust a protector who smells of both hunter and abomination. You must dissolve the bond and allow us to execute him. Only then can we ensure the purity of our sanctuary. The purity you cherish almost led to your extinction," Seraphina retorted, her voice shaking with controlled fury. "Kalen Thorne is not a tool. He is proof that humanity and power can coexist. To destroy him is to admit that Lysander and his creed were right, that there is no possibility of peace, only eradication." She was constantly watched, challenged, and forced to defend every choice. The elders respected her lineage, but they despised her choice of a mate. Her strength was slowly being drained by the incessant political maneuvering. Cashin remained her lone, staunch ally in the court, his loyalty unwavering. "The queen has proven her wisdom," he argued, his voice cold and unwavering. "Do not let ancient fear blind you to modern necessity. We need the knowledge he carries." Days bled into a week. Kalen had been given only water. The bloodthirst was a constant torment, making it difficult to control his amplified heart rate and breathing. The vampire part of him was starving. Then one night the cell door creaked open. Seraphina stood there, wrapped in shadows, her exhaustion clear even in the faint light filtering from the corridor. Her face was pale, her eyes burning with fierce determination. "They will not allow this," Kalen whispered, pulling himself to his feet. "They will not control me," Seraphina countered, closing the door and silencing the lock. She rushed to him, embracing him fiercely. The reconnection of the bond was a blinding relief to both of them, a surge of shared energy and emotion that momentarily banished the darkness. Kalen clung to her, the smell of her blood an almost unbearable perfume. He trembled, his control fragile. "Seraphina, I can't. I don't know if I can stop." "You are not going to stop," she said, her voice husky. "You're going to survive. I broke the rules and used the last of my stored energy to ensure this visit was private. You are starving, my love." She pulled back, pushing her hair away to expose the pulse point in her neck, a deliberate, profound act of trust. "Take what you need, Kalen," she commanded, her voice softening with tenderness. "You are my protector. Your life is my strength." Kalen looked at her, fighting the last vestiges of his hunter's creed. He was a creature who now needed his prey to survive. He leaned in, finally succumbing not to the monster but to the bond, the ultimate sealing of their impossible love and fate. Kalen woke from a fitful, blood-fueled sleep, his mind sharper than ever. The nourishment from Seraphina had not only sustained him but had also amplified his latent hunter's memory. His enhanced senses began to pick up patterns and fragments of intelligence his human mind had long suppressed. Serafina was gone, having slipped away before dawn, but the warmth of her presence and the power of the bond lingered. Kalen sat in the darkness, concentrating, pulling at the threads of his former life. He suddenly saw it, a specific non-silver alloy that Lysander had been secretly developing in the months before Kalen's defection. It was a bronze-tungsten mixture, capable of piercing even ancient vampire hide, and crucially, it was invisible to vampire wards that usually detected silver. He also remembered a specific coded message Lysander had sent to the Hunter Councils immediately after the Blood Shard incident. Initiate Operation Phoenix. Target, Northern Sanctuary. Kalen knew Lysander would not stop. Defeated and disgraced, the Elder would seek an even greater, more destructive victory to reclaim his authority. He would use the new, unwarded weapons and launch a full-scale, massive assault. When Cashin came to check on him, Kalen relayed the information with urgency. Lysander isn't resting, Kalen rasped, the knowledge burning in his voice. He is preparing Operation Phoenix. He has a new weapon, a bronze-tungsten alloy that your wards won't detect. He knows the location of the northern stronghold, or he has a way to find it. Cashin's face, usually reserved, showed genuine shock. New metal? Undetectable? If that is true, our wards are useless and this fortress is a tomb. It is true, Kalen insisted. He will come in force. Not for the shard, but for total eradication. You must warn Serafina and the elders. Cashin didn't hesitate. He saw the cold, strategic clarity in Kalen's eyes, the unshakable certainty of a hunter who knew his enemy. Cashin immediately brought the information to Serafina and the elders. The atmosphere in the Great Hall, already tense, became explosive. Lord Forlag was furious. He is attempting to sow discord. This is a hunter's trick to weaken us, a lie from an abomination we should have executed. If this is a lie, Forlag, then why has Lysander's primary informer, a man who worked at his side for decades, just informed us of our utter weakness? Serafina challenged, her voice filled with controlled rage. Kalen has no reason to lie, his life is also at stake. Lady Alara, always pragmatic, finally conceded to the threat. If the wards fail, our people will be exposed. We must confirm this information. But how? There is no time for confirmation, Kalen's voice cut through the hall. He had been escorted back under guard, forced to stand before the hostile council. Lysander moves fast. He won't wait. I know his strategy, I know his tactics, and I know his weaknesses. You need to choose, elders, your prejudice or your survival. Kalen looked directly at Lord Forlag. Lysander will target the East Wing, the only area that relies on mechanical fortifications rather than magical wards. He will use heavy artillery to breach it, then send his elite forces in with the tungsten weapons. You must reinforce the East Wing with your strongest warriors, not your wards. The elders exchanged desperate, fearful glances. Kalen's military insight was undeniably accurate. It spoke of a deep knowledge of hunter methodology. The threat of annihilation suddenly outweighed their hatred. Lord Forlag slammed his fist on the obsidian table. We cannot trust you, Hunter, but we cannot ignore your warning. Cashin, take this. Protector. Use his knowledge to reinforce the East Wing. But if he steps out of line, his death will be slow and agonizing. Serafina stepped to Kalen's side, placing her hand firmly on his uninjured arm. He will not step out of line, Elder, Serafina declared, a new authority in her voice. He is mine. And his freedom is the price of your survival. Kalen Thorne is no longer your prisoner. He is your commander. The hunter had returned to his command, but now he led the forces of the night he was sworn to destroy, fighting the very army he had helped build. Kalen was no longer a prisoner. He was a commander standing on the precipice of war. He found himself in the strange position of using his lifelong knowledge of the hunter's creed against his own former forces. Kalen, with Cashin grudgingly at his side, was led to the East Wing. The area was massive, with thick stone walls reinforced by ancient, mechanical levers, a relic from a time before magical wards dominated vampire defenses. The vampire warriors assigned to the defense were ancient, powerful, but arrogant. They moved with a detached disdain, viewing Kalen as a distasteful necessity. You will follow my orders precisely, Kalen commanded, his voice sharp and carrying the ring of a hunter trained in leadership. The elders tell you I am a traitor. I tell you I know the enemy you face better than you know your own fangs. He pointed to a large, open courtyard just beyond the walls. Lysander will not use his standard silver bombardment. He will use heavy siege equipment to breach this wall. We do not fight at the wall, we let them through. Their arrogance will be their downfall. Let them through? A tall, proud vampire named Valerius scoffed. We stand and hold the line, Hunter. We do not retreat. You stand and die. Kalen retorted, meeting Valerius's challenge with a glare amplified by his vampiric intensity. "This is not a siege, it is a trap. Lysander wants us focused on the wall." Cassian explained the tungsten alloy. Cassian, recognizing the tactical genius, stepped forward. "The metal Kalen warned us of bypasses our shielding. If we fight outside the wards we are exposed. We draw them into the warding circle inside, where our innate magic will overwhelm their human bodies." Kalen and Cassian worked tirelessly, their coordination becoming startlingly effective. Kalen directed the engineering, positioning ancient heavy stone blocks to create internal kill zones and instructing the vampires to hide their positions. Cassian managed the warriors, translating Kalen's military commands into the language of the proud vampire soldiers and ensuring their disciplined adherence. "You understand the depth of Lysander's strategy," Cassian observed one moment as they surveyed their hidden positions. "He planned for every contingency except your survival." "I know how the Creed fights because I know how Lysander thinks," Kalen replied, his gaze distant. "He views you all as targets, not warriors. He expects panic and chaos. We will give him order and precision." "And you're wound?" Cassian asked, looking at the silver-scarred shoulder. "The bond holds the silver at bay," Kalen said, flexing his arm. "But it is a constant drain on Seraphina's strength. We have to end this quickly, or it will cost her everything." Kalen caught fleeting moments with Seraphina as she traversed the tunnels, working on a complex counterward strategy with the elders. These brief encounters were his only anchor. "They look to you now, my love," Seraphina whispered, her hand tracing the harsh lines of exhaustion on his face. "They look to the hunter they hate," Kalen corrected, pulling her close. "But I will use their hate to save them." "Are the elders cooperating with your wards?" "They fear Lysander more than their pride," she replied. "But Kalen, the strain of the bond, it is weakening me. You must win this. If I fall, the bond will fail and the silver will finally claim you." The pressure was suffocating. Kalen was fighting a war on 3 fronts. Lysander's army outside, the vampire prejudice within, and the time limit set by Seraphina's fading strength. The moment of truth arrived just before dawn. A massive, reverberating explosion ripped through the silence of the northern wastes. Lysander was here. Kalen's hyperhearing picked up the terrifying symphony of human war, the rumbling of heavy machinery, the crisp commands of hunter officers, and the triumphant war cries of hundreds of men. "They've deployed the siege machines, just as I predicted," Kalen announced calmly to the gathered vampire warriors. "Hold your positions. Valerius, when the breach is clear, light the torches at the warding circle. Draw them in." Valerius looked at Kalen, his face a mix of fear and dawning respect. "As you command, Hunter." The heavy artillery began its barrage. The strong east wing walls shuddered under the force, and large sections of the mechanical defenses began to crumble. Kalen stood his ground, a calm island in the rising tide of fear. He was ready to face the man who had betrayed him and to fight the army he had once led. Intensified, shaking the very foundations of the mountain. Stone fragments and dust filled the air, and the roar of the hunter's siege engines was deafening. Kalen stood at the forward command post, a former hunter now the nerve center of the vampire defense. "Halt." Kalen barked, his voice carrying surprising authority over the chaos. His enhanced hearing allowed him to track the trajectory of every incoming projectile. "Wait for the breach. No movement until they are inside the killing zone." The vampire warriors were coiled with anticipation, their centuries-old patience strained by the sudden, brutal speed of human warfare. Finally, with a tremendous, grinding sound, the east wing wall gave way. A gaping hole appeared, spewing dust and stone fragments. Immediately, the triumphant yells of the hunter forces filled the gap. "Forward! For the Creed! Eradicate the darkness!" the hunter commander screamed. Hundreds of hunters, clad in their dark armor and armed with the deadly bronze tungsten weapons, poured through the breach, rushing into the fortress, expecting terrified, disorganized prey. Instead, they found the inner courtyard empty. "Now, Valerius, light the warding circle," Kalen commanded. Valerius, still disdainful but now impressed, threw a torch onto a vat of oil. Torches flared up across the courtyard, illuminating the concealed perimeter, the warding circle. As the hunters streamed past the perimeter, they suddenly stumbled. Their movements became sluggish, their heavy armor felt impossibly cumbersome. Their human bodies were being oppressed by the ancient magic. "Cassian, engage," Kalen yelled. Cassian and his forces surged from their hidden positions. They moved with terrifying vampiric speed, now magnified by the hunter's magical paralysis. They fought with cold, precise efficiency, aiming for the few exposed spots not covered by the tungsten armor. It was a massacre. The hunters, expecting a battle of silver and fire, were facing an enemy utilizing human tactics against human weakness. Kalen knew this was just the first wave. He scanned the breach, looking for the architect of the chaos. And then Lysander entered. The elder stood framed in the dust-filled breach, clad in simple dark cloth, clutching a massive, ceremonial tungsten-tipped lance. His eyes, colder than the northern wastes, fixed instantly on Kalen. "Traitor!" Lysander roared, his voice thick with fanaticism. "You lead the monsters. You are lower than the dirt they feed on." "I lead the truth, elder." Kalen shouted back, raising his vein-killer blades. "You traded your faith for a weapon that failed you. This ends here." Lysander charged, not with strategy but with blind, destructive rage. He was faster and stronger than Kalen remembered, his personal weapon untainted by the nullification. Kalen parried the heavy lance, the force driving him back several feet. The silver scar on his shoulder throbbed painfully, a raw reminder that his very existence was still a drain on Seraphina's diminishing strength. He couldn't afford a long duel. Lysander pressed the attack, forcing Kalen back toward the center of the warding circle. "Your new blood won't save you, abomination. I will purge the taint." Kalen let Lysander's attack drive him toward the central courtyard, where the magical oppression was strongest. He saw Cassian and the others fighting valiantly, but the hunters were relentless, driven by Lysander's zealous command. As Lysander thrust the heavy lance at his chest, Kalen moved. He used his borrowed speed not to dodge, but to shift his body at the last second, allowing the lance to graze his side. The tungsten ripped through the skin, the raw pain momentarily overwhelming. But Kalen had bought his opening. With a surge of pure, desperate adrenaline, Kalen plunged his vein-killer blade, the weapon he was given to kill vampires, into Lysander's thigh. The hunter's training was still perfect. The blade severed a major artery. Lysander staggered back, his triumphant roar turning into a choked gasp of pain. He looked at Kalen, his eyes flickering between hatred and disbelief. "You are still a hunter," Lysander whispered, collapsing to his knees, his zealous energy bleeding away onto the stone. "No," Kalen said, standing over his fallen mentor, his face grim. "I'm just a man who chose the right side." The sight of their elder commander felled by the traitor broke the remaining will of the invading hunter forces. With a final command from Cassian, the vampire warriors closed in for the complete victory. The immediate threat was neutralized. But Kalen knew the war wasn't over. As Lysander lay defeated, the true danger remained unseen. The hunter invasion was crushed. The floor of the East Wing was littered with disabled hunters and the remnants of their tungsten weapons. Kalen, his side bleeding from the lance wound, watched the final resistance fade, the immense tension finally leaving his body. Kalen walked over to where Lysander lay bleeding. He wanted to look into his former mentor's eyes and force him to admit his betrayal. But Lysander was gone. Only a large pool of fresh blood remained where Kalen had left him. No hunter would have risked carrying their injured leader back through the deadly warding circle. "Cassian." Kalen barked, his enhanced senses searching for a trail. "Lysander is not here. He escaped." Cassian rushed over, his face grim. He must have had help. A secondary escape route known only to him or a teleportation ward. Some hunters carry rare items for emergency extraction. "He's not just a fanatic, he's a general," Kalen muttered, wiping the blood from his cheek. "He won't stop. He'll rebuild his forces and target us again. We won the battle, but the war's mastermind is free." The victory felt hollow, tainted by the knowledge that the primary threat still existed. Kalen's attention was ripped from the military threat by a sudden sharp jolt of pain in his chest. The Bond was screaming. He sprinted towards the inner chamber where Seraphina was overseeing the counter wards. He found her slumped against a column, her breathing shallow and ragged, her ruby eyes closed. The elders, including Lord Forlag, stood over her, their expressions a mix of fear and confusion. "Seraphina." Kalen knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was faint and frantic. "The Bond," she whispered weakly, opening her eyes. "The continuous drain, Kalen. Fighting the silver and fueling your fight, it was too much. The wards held, but my energy is depleted." Lord Forlag looked at Kalen with dawning horror. The hunter, his injury. "You needed constant energy to keep the silver at bay, and she sacrificed her very life essence to sustain you." "I am fine," Kalen insisted, ignoring his own throbbing wound. He took her hands, pouring his own meager strength back into her. But his strength was only a fraction of hers, and his own body was still struggling with the hybrid transformation. "No," Seraphina shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. "The silver is in your blood, Kalen. It will always require my power. I am fading, protector. You must survive. You must lead the others." The elders' acceptance. The elders looked at the collapsed queen and the battered, bloodied hybrid hunter kneeling beside her. They had witnessed the terrifying efficiency of his command and now saw the devastating cost of his survival. The realization was undeniable. Kaelin had paid for their victory with his own life, and Seraphina had paid with hers. Lady Elara, the pragmatic elder, finally stepped forward. She looked at Kaelin not with hatred but with a weary acknowledgement. The prophecy of the two rings, Elara murmured, recalling an ancient text. The hunter who rejects the light and the queen who embraces the shadow. Their bond sustains the world, but it costs them their very souls. Lord Forlag, humbled by the near annihilation and the sacrifice he had witnessed, addressed Kaelin, the former enemy, as an equal. Kaelin Thorn, Forlag said heavily. You have saved our sanctuary from the Creed. You are no longer our prisoner nor our commander. You are the protector of the court. But your queen needs you. If the bond breaks, the silver and the ancient magic will destroy you. Save her, Hunter. The fate of our courts rests on your forbidden bond. Kaelin lifted Seraphina gently into his arms. The scorn was gone, replaced by a grudging, desperate reliance. He had finally earned the acceptance of the vampire world, but he had lost his strength and his queen was dying. Kaelin moved with a desperate, singular focus. Ignoring his own pain, he carried the fading Seraphina through the labyrinthine tunnels of the stronghold. The elders, now cooperative, provided him with ancient maps and whispered guidance. You must take her to the Temple of the Dual Moon, Lord Forlag instructed, his voice grave. It is an ancient, neutral ground far to the south, where the first covenants between our kind were forged. It holds the power to stabilize the most volatile of bonds. But the ritual demands an equal sacrifice from both the human and the immortal. The journey south was a race against time and Seraphina's diminishing life force. Cashin led the way while Kaelin held Seraphina close. Her pulse was weak and her body was growing cold. Kaelin felt the bond weakening, and with it, the cold, gnawing burn of the silver scar on his shoulder intensified. He knew he was hours away from being consumed. You should have left me, Protector, Seraphina whispered, her voice faint. The bond will kill you. Never, Kaelin replied, his voice rough with emotion. You saved me from a life of hate. I will save you from fading. We are bound, Seraphina. If you die, a part of me, the part that finally knew love, dies with you. The truth of his words was undeniable. He was no longer just the protector, he was defined by this forbidden connection. They reached the temple, an open-air ruin high on a windswept plateau, built of white marble that glowed faintly under the starlight. In the center lay a vast, circular altar inscribed with glyphs depicting the joining of sun and shadow. Cashin quickly prepared the area, lighting ancient braziers that cast flickering light on the altar. The ritual is simple but irreversible, Cashin explained, reading from the ancient map. The bonded pair must exchange blood again on the altar. But the human must willingly surrender his remaining mortality, and the immortal must surrender her ancient authority. My mortality is already fading, Kaelin said, laying Seraphina gently on the altar. Not enough, Cashin insisted. You must offer a piece of your human soul to the bond. And Seraphina must permanently share her queen's authority with you, making you her equal in power, but also her permanent vessel. If the ritual worked, they would stabilize the bond, giving Kaelin the permanent strength to fight the silver without draining Seraphina. If it failed, they would both be instantly extinguished. Kaelin knelt beside Seraphina, her face illuminated by the flickering braziers. Her eyes, filled with a profound depth of love and fear, met his. This is the end of the line, Kaelin, she whispered. No, Seraphina, he said, taking her hand. This is the covenant. He reached for his vein-killer blade and without hesitation, drew a deep cut across his own palm, allowing his hybrid blood to flow freely onto the cold marble altar. I, Kaelin Thorn, the hunter who chose love over creed, offer the last of my human soul to this bond. I accept the darkness, the thirst, and the eternal fight, to be your equal, your shield, and your anchor. Seraphina, mustering her last reserves of strength, used her sharp nail to pierce her own palm, mixing her ancient, powerful blood with his on the altar. I, Seraphina Vane, the queen who chose truth over tradition, offer the last of my authority to this bond. I accept the burden, the risk, and the love, to be your mate, your guardian, and your life source. As their blood mingled on the altar, the glyphs on the marble flared violently. A column of intense, stabilizing white light shot from the altar toward the twin moons above. The power surged through their clasped hands, binding them in a profound, terrifying moment of creation. Kaelin felt a terrifying finality, the last spark of his original self extinguished, replaced by a permanent, steady, immortal power. Seraphina's body arched, the draining exhaustion replaced by a sudden, peaceful surge of stable energy. When the light faded, they lay side by side, forever changed. The bond was complete, stable, and unbreakable. Kaelin's silver scar was gone, replaced by a smooth, dark line, the permanent mark of the covenant. They were no longer simply hunter and prey, they were the hybrid guardians. The temple of the dual moon was silent. The terrifying surge of power had faded, leaving behind a profound, unwavering stability. Kalen was no longer fighting the silver. The dark line on his shoulder was smooth, cold, and quiet, the mark of the covenant, proof of his permanent, hybridized status. He rose from the altar, his movements fluid, powerful, and entirely his own. The constant, overwhelming clamor of his new senses had quieted into a manageable vigilance. He was whole. Seraphina also rose, fully healed and stronger than before. The anxiety in her eyes was replaced by a calm, ancient authority. She was still the queen, but now she ruled beside her bonded equal. "It is done, my love," Seraphina whispered, her voice husky. "We are now the guardians, forever bound." They returned to the northern stronghold briefly, where the elders, led by a genuinely humbled Lord Forlag, offered them permanent sanctuary. But Kalen and Seraphina knew they could not stay. Lysander was still alive, and his war would eventually find them, endangering the entire court. "We must leave," Kalen declared. "We are the targets. As long as we are in the shadows, they are safe." Cashin, now their fiercely loyal right hand, understood. "I will remain here, my queen. I will lead the defense and prepare the courts for the coming conflict. Go. Be safe." Kalen and Seraphina accepted their fate as eternal fugitives. They chose a life on the edges of the world, in the wild, untamed spaces where no hunter would expect to find a queen. Lysander's End. Months later, they tracked Lysander to a remote, abandoned chapel deep in the southern forests. The former elder had managed to gather a small, fanatical band of hunters, still driven by the failed zealotry of the creed. Kalen and Seraphina moved in unison, a seamless blend of tactical prowess and ancient power. Kalen's training allowed them to bypass every security measure Lysander had set. They found Lysander alone, planning his next move, a desperate fire in his eyes. "You should be dead, abomination," Lysander cried, seeing Kalen. "We are beyond death, elder," Seraphina stated, her voice resonating with her new power. "Your creed is broken, your weapon is dust, and your life is forfeit." Kalen stood before his former mentor, his face grim. He didn't use a blade or power. He used a simple human choice. "I will not kill you, Lysander," Kalen said, "because I am no longer defined by your hate. You will live the rest of your life hunted by the very truth you sought to destroy." They left him there, disarmed and utterly defeated, to face the inevitable fallout from the failed war. A fate Kalen knew was a far worse torment than a quick death. The chapter of the Hunter's Creed was closed forever. Years passed. Kalen and Seraphina built a silent life in a forgotten corner of the world, living beneath the twin moons. Kalen was Seraphina's protector in every sense, her strategist, her guardian, and her beloved mate. Seraphina was his life source, his anchor, his queen, and the only person who understood the terrible cost of his existence. He was the human who fell for his prey, becoming the hybrid guardian he was always meant to be. Their forbidden love was the shield that protected them, and the covenant was the power that sustained the world's fragile balance. One night, sitting beneath a canopy of stars, Seraphina leaned her head on Kalen's shoulder, tracing the mark of the covenant on his skin. "Do you regret your choice, Kalen Thorn?" she asked softly. "Losing your human life?" Kalen looked at the stars, then down at the woman who was now his entire world. "I lost a life of loneliness and lies," Kalen replied, pulling her close. "And I gained an eternity of truth, love, and purpose. I am exactly where I belong, my queen. Your protector forever."